few years ago, I was in a coffee shop, and there was hundreds of people walking by. I found myself curious about all these lives, so I wondered what I could do to get these strangers to stop and share a story with me. I wondered what we might have in common besides just both being strangers. So I took a marker and a notebook, and I wrote a sign that just invited people to stop and share. I was a little bit nervous when I first put it up because I had no idea how they would react. But in the first few minutes, 2 women stopped by and asked what I was doing. I told them I'm not really sure yet, but I asked them if they would mind writing something about their lives in my notebook. They both agreed, and this is how I started collecting stories from strangers. So I collect these stories in public spaces all around the country. I go out with a stack of blank paper, clipboards, and a whole lot of pens. And I really just invite people to share anything about their lives. And during this time, over 7,000 people have shared their stories with me. You can see them here. This is from one of our exhibits. So story sharing is pretty much what makes us human. It's something we all share. And I wanted to create spaces where we could explore these similarities in us. This is always about just like an actual intimate physical space. So none of these are sent in. There's no internet. It's all just people handwriting right on the spot. When I first started collecting these stories, I got about 10 of them on that first day, and I thought that was a lot of stories. The volume of stories has changed since then, but the wide range of topics hasn't. So one of the first stories I got was, I just held a pigeon. I guess I haven't lived in New York long enough to be blasé about this, because this is one of the coolest things I've ever done. Go on, judge me, strangers. I'm holding a bird. Now, people sometimes write about just really simple moments in their life, and other people will explore some really deep experiences that they've had. The scene is the aftermath of a bombing at a checkpoint near Gaza. There are around a dozen dead, and the bomber is not among them. He survives with lacerations from shrapnel throughout his body and a punctured lung. Triage has been sorted, and I'm assigned to treat the bomber. A year ago, my life turned upside down, sideways, and zigzag. There are 2 heartbeats, twins. Over the next few months, I was on a roller coaster of emotions, hesitations, doubt, anger, depression, exhaustion, fear. I shed so many tears. I'm a planner, and this was not my plan. And at the bottom of the story, she talks about how if she could go back and talk to herself now, she would have told herself it's all going to be perfect. I spent a good 2 years in New York City as a homeless man. During this time, I slept both in the parks as well as subway trains when the weather was bad. I got to experience firsthand the kindness of strangers, as I had to resort to panhandling in order to get money. As you can see, there's a really wide range of stories that people share. They come from all walks of life and all ages. This next girl that shared something had stopped by. I told her about the project, and she said, I obviously have to do this. I'm a writer. When I was younger, I always wanted a pet zebra. That was only a few years ago when I was 7. Now I'm 11. I asked my mom about getting a pet zebra, and she said, no, Abby, you cannot get a pet zebra. Do you know how absurd that is? Maybe she wasn't actually yelling, but she wasn't like, Abby, dear, we cannot get a pet zebra. So I decided to write a song about her called Dream Crusher. As you can see, there's also a huge range of handwriting, which is one of my favorite parts of the project. There's just a lot of personality in it. People are given a blank canvas, and some of them use more than just words to share their story. A lot of people will draw stuff on here. This one, you can't actually even read the story, but it's beautiful. So one of the most common questions I get is, what's the best story you've gotten in the project? And there's a lot of amazing stories, but I don't think that's what's important here. What's important is that these people made a choice to share something. I'm reminded of a stranger I met last summer. This was a man who stopped by and asked what I was doing, as most people do. And we talked for a little bit, and I invited him to share his story. He said he didn't have anything worth sharing. So instead, he read a few stories, thanked me, and left. A few hours later, he came back and said, is it okay if I still write something? He took a clipboard and went and sat with it for a long time. When he came back, he handed it to me with this. I am surviving brain cancer, so far. What I'm reminded of is that these stories are just snapshots of living. It's not an entire life, but it's a moment that somebody chose to share. It's important enough to them that they chose to share it, and that's what gives these stories value. So what makes somebody want to share a story? This was a stranger who sort of talked about the curiosity that led to it. All these people are staring at me as I sit here and write this. I think they're curious, and maybe even wishing their legs would stop here to write. But mostly, they're probably wondering what I'm writing. After all, that's what I did. It's weird to me that none of them know that I'm 18, I love strawberries, this is my first time in New York, and my mom died a month ago. I don't really expect them to know. I just wish they did sometimes. So there's no real demographics or psychographics that lead somebody to share a story. There's no way to look at them physically and know that, who's going to stop by or what they're going to write. But it's really just about everybody sharing their stories. We did an event last summer where we invited people to collect stories from all around the world. And over 800 people ended up signing up in 60 countries. These were just some of the volunteers. And what this really shows is that there's an empathic resonance that people get when they share their stories. And there's no borders that keep people from wanting to share. These were some of the people that collected stories all around the world. My mantra for the project has always been, everyone has a story. Stories are a way to entertain us, but they're also a way for us to recognize our humanity. I went into this wanting to explore some of that. And this project isn't just about writing and reading stories. It's about the connection that forms between teller and listener. And I think that's a connection that we can explore more in our everyday lives. This project is about taking the time to pay attention to one another. And it's about acknowledging the people we share space with and saying, what's your story? Thanks, guys.